Hello there, thank you for clicking on my video again. So we're in week 6 of Michaelmas term at Oxford University. I'm Shreya and I study English Lang and Lit, for those of you who don't know or aren't familiar with my blog, Paradise Prose. This video is going to be about reflecting on my progress this week and what it's been like doing my course, and I hope to be putting up these video updates every week or at least every fortnight, um, just to map my journey over these next 3 years and share how I'm getting through the course. I'm going to start off by talking about the 3 different parts of my course. So one part is learning Old English from the year 650 to 1350, the very earliest English. I'm also doing Introduction to English Language and Literature, which is paper 1. That is just a base, knowledge base for how to analyze language. It is the language part that we're doing this year, that we're focusing on at least in the first part of this year. That's what I'll be talking about. And the heaviest part of the course is Victorian literature. Now this anyone with just a general knowledge of Victorian literature will know that because of serialization, the novels in the Victorian era could get quite chunky. This is probably the most work-heavy part of my course. So without further ado, let's talk about paper 1. So that's my Introduction to Language and Literature class. So in the course, I've only had one tute so far. For those of you who don't know, a tute is a tutorial, short for tutorial, and the tutorial is basically how teaching happens at Oxford. It's very unique to Oxbridge, and essentially the system is that you have one-on-one or 2 students in a group with a tutor talking about an essay you've done on the theme of the tutorial that week. So you get very personalized teaching. And I've got some feedback on my first piece of work. So this has an interesting story behind it. For my first piece of work, I really had to rush it because I was just really struggling to deal with my anxiety and stress in the days previous to the deadline, and I found myself having to complete work last minute, like just the day before. So and I was extremely stressed. I could not focus for the life of me, and I just forced myself to sit down and get this piece of work done, because no matter how bad your work is, you need to hand something in. I feel like just that commitment to hand a completed piece of work in is what's going to keep me on top of the course, even if it's not perfect. So that was hard for me because I'm a perfectionist at heart, and I just have to switch off my perfectionism. It is easier because the deadlines are in such quick succession that you almost don't even get time to think about being a perfectionist. You just have to deliver. So the feedback I got, I know I wasn't my best work because I rushed it and I really had to persevere and sit down with all my anxiety and just bang it out and just completely ignore any of my scruples about whether this work is perfect or whether this is up to the mark. I just did it, and that's why naturally there was a bit more criticism. My tutor said I really need to be more precise. I need to give more examples, consider different elements of the work. Like for language, we have to consider, we don't just consider the meanings of the words and their connotations, but we also consider typography. The fact if some words are italicized, well, what effect does that have? And I kind of didn't do much critical reading for this first piece of work, which was fine. But ideally I really should have done more. At university level it's expected. So, what did I learn from this? I need to leave time for proofreading. Now, why am I not getting proofreading done? Is because I spend the first half of the week stressing out and not doing much work. And then it gets pushed to the nearer to the deadline. And then when I realize there's a deadline, I can't afford to be stressed anymore, and I just have to get it done. So, my target for this coming week is going to be to space uh, out my effort more and just force myself to put in the effort every single day rather than just the day before, because that's when it gets really hard. Okay, moving swiftly on to Old English, which is paper 2 on my course. So the interesting thing about Old English, I find, is that I never really knew what to expect from this part of the course. Like, maximum, the best that I thought, the most that I thought it would be is just like about battles and warriors and all these unrelatable things. But actually, some of it is actually like recognizably literary. So we were doing one of our set texts, which is called The Dream of the Rood, which essentially tells the story of Christ's cross from the perspective of the cross. So the whole crucifixion from the perspective of the cross. And the cross actually comes in a dream of the dream of the speaker, the narrator, and the narrator has a dream about the cross speaking to him, and then we go into this narrative, the cross personified, where he's telling the story of how he came to be Christ's, he came to bear Christ on himself, and how he had to witness the terrible crucifixion. So I found this really fascinating, as like just the personification and just the it's just something unique for them to switch the perspective from Christ to the cross. So this week we did the last part of that poem, and it was this last part is about how the cross is finally discovered, and then it becomes honored all around by men all around the country and across the country, and it's raised to the level of Mary. Just like Mary bore Jesus, the cross also bears Jesus during the crucifixion. And it's quite meta-fictional, because you have so many different layers. You have, so first you have the narrator, who is the person who had this dream. Then you have the cross, who is also talking to us. So these two levels kind of, the author shifts between these two levels, and that is what's really interesting, because sometimes you have the cross speaking to the narrator and saying, well, you pay attention to what I'm about to say. So yeah, and also very interesting is the fact that this cross goes through different stages. So we see the cross when it's first in its raw form as a tree, then the wood gets cut down and made into a cross, and then the cross becomes this venerated symbol. So just those different phases made the concept of the rood, or a rood is a cross, very interesting. And plus it has a happy ending, which is so rare in literature. I'm tired of reading tragedies, and while they can be very moving, I think it's nice to read something that's a bit more optimistic for once. So, optimistic or celebratory. So, yeah. That's and we've really finished quite quickly, because we've already moved on from the Battle of Malden, which was my first text, and now we are done with Dream of the Rood. So I'll keep you updated on what comes up next. Finally, paper 3. I'm doing Victorian literature. Now, what I focused on last week was Melville's Moby Dick, which is a big novel, I think over 130 chapters, about a man called Ishmael who goes on a whaling journey. Now, a whaling journey is, just like it sounds, a journey where these whalers or harpooneers, a bunch of sailors with special abilities to like hunt whales go on together on a voyage, and they hunt down whales. Now, and the premise of the story is that Captain Ahab, um, a famous, well, not a famous, but a very experienced whaler, um, wants to hunt down Moby Dick, which is also known as the white whale. And this whale is supposedly so dangerous and so almost like supernaturally powerful that it keeps tempting Captain Ahab to hunt him down, but nobody can ever actually destroy this whale. Um, so yes, as you can imagine, this does not end well. Spoiler alert, but I think it's pretty obvious from the beginning that it won't end well. Um, so yeah, this has been really interesting. I was able to look at like genre. So I was looking at how the book had different structures and forms. So like there would be times when the narrator would go into like a sermon, and sometimes it would go into like a diary, and sometimes it would be even scientific. It would be like explaining to you the science of whaling. So I was thinking about like why that might be, and part of it just like it's just like a postmodern almost it's a technique that's typical of a postmodern novel, but it's written in the Victorian era. So in that way, Melville is quite unconventional. That he intermingles all these different genres to reflect a sort of chaotic. Chaotic kind of panorama of maybe American voices or the state of America at the time. So many different interpretations you could go with there. That's what English is about. Um, so based on these two, I think what I need to work on now is two things. Firstly, I need to work on setting aside some time to do Old English, because I'm finding it really difficult to read the Old English because it's a different language, so I can hardly understand it, and sometimes that makes it really slow to study and like get into the work and really pick apart its meanings. So what I'll do is I'll probably set aside an hour every week to just revise some Old English vocabulary, um, and I also think it would be worth buying translation, which is face to face with the original Old English. That way I'll be able to see really what I'll be able to see like what each of the words mean very easily, because right now I'm having to use different versions. And for paper 3, again, I need to keep to my schedule. Funny story, I keep falling asleep in my lectures, which is quite a conundrum because I really want to listen, but the sound of the tutor's voice just gently droning on about the subject, it's just conducive to sleep for me. So I've decided to do some coloring while I'm listening in my lectures so that I don't fall asleep, because the stuff in the lectures is slightly tricky to get your head around, and for some reason my brain thinks, oh, well, this is tricky, let me just switch off. But obviously that's not going to work in the long term. So that is one thing I'm going to do, and I'm also then going to try and keep to my schedule more strictly. I think I'm maybe lacking in a bit of discipline, and I also get like I wake up late sometimes, and then I get kind of stumble through the day. And part of that is because I get stressed so easily. But I think I have to do meditation, mindfulness, breathing exercises, and really keep my anxiety under control. Otherwise, my schedule just goes for a toss, and I cannot keep up with the pace of work, and I end up having too much work on one day. But good things are that this week I handed in all my work, which is exactly what we were looking for, no perfectionism, and I managed my emotions pretty well. I think there were a few bad patches, but overall I've been pushing against the anxiety. And by the way, if anyone needs like an app for mental health support, I can highly recommend Wobot, which is like an artificial intelligence robot, which you can download an app and you basically just chat with this robot, and it helps you to practice CBT on your own, and just maybe like even deal with symptoms of anxiety or depression. I'm finding that it's very useful for me to just ground myself and keep calm and carry on. So, would highly recommend that. Yeah, that's it for this week. Thank you for watching, and I will see you hopefully in the next 2 weeks. Bye.